Thanks very much for the kind invitation to speak in this conference, and I'm delighted to be here. I don't waste too much time on introduce myself, but I do want to give you a brief introduction about CISAC. Not sure many of the guests will know the background of CISAC. CISAC is International Confederation of Societies of Authors and Composers. We found CISAC was founded in 1926. We have over almost 90 years of history. We are a non-governmental and non-profit organization. We have members about 227 author societies, in 120 countries, over 3 million. Our members represent over 3 million creators and publishers. Some of our members representatives are here from Australia, from Japan, from Hong Kong, from Singapore, and our member in Taiwan is MÜST. We don't only represent music interests, we also represent the societies which collect royalties from collections from dramatic work, audiovisual work, literary work, and visual arts. These are the key goals we believe, and these are the main activities that we are doing. I don't go into detail. We are an international organization, have members in 120 countries. We have regional office in 4 places, and I'm from the China office, which used to be in Singapore and now relocate. We just recently moved to Beijing. And in Asia Pacific, we have 28 members in 17 countries, territories. And these are the members in Asia Pacific. So I would like to give you a brief introduction about what are the key elements for a tariff setting and what are the tariff reviews mechanism around the world. But my colleagues from colleagues from Australia and Japan will further to explore the situation in Australia and Japan, so that to give you more in perspective of how it is put in practice about the tariff setting and tariff review. But before I go to the tariff setting part is, Mr. Hong also mentioned about the situation in Taiwan, and in fact, collective management is for copyright is very important for right holders to be able to collect royalties to sustain their livelihood. Why I say this is because collective management organizations have a very key essential economic function. It provides a solution where individual licensing is impractical or impossible, because each of the right holders, if they have to negotiate to all users around the country, it will be very time consuming and it will be basically impossible. And CMOs also facilitate copyright owners to license their works to a multiplicity of users. Just like what I've said, it will be easy to reach out to different users at the same time. And because it will be doing the licensing in a more simplistic way, so it will make it easier and cheaper for users to obtain a broad license from one entity. So CMO is like a middleman to be able to help all the members to license one broad license to users, to enable the users to be access to these works in a more easy and cheaper manner. And lastly, it will provide an efficient channel by which users can gain lawful access to a wide range of repertoire. That's I've just explained. Some of the principle about tariff setting is also mentioned by Mr. Hong earlier about the situation in Taiwan. But before a CMO's is the review of the tariffs just mentioned by Mr. Hong in his presentation, we have to understand how a CMO is operating. CMO, collective management organization, before they go to collect the royalties from the users, they will have to tell people, okay, what are the charges for the royalties for such usage. So because we believe in all the CISAC members, we will require them to be able to provide the maximum transparency to the market. So a lot of CMOs, especially members of CISAC, they will publish their tariff nowadays in internet, and also they will in the past they will also being requested, all these tariffs for particular usage will have to be published. And in fact, in some of the countries, the publication of tariffs is also a legislative requirement. So because of this, it will ensure certainty about what you're paying for, and then secondly, will ensure this is the transparency as to how to calculate the royalties being paid to the CMO. When CMO is determining the respective tariff for the usage of the works, they have to take into account different factors to establish such tariffs. Earlier on, Mr. Hong also mentioned about when they review a tariff, they have to take into account these factors. But in fact, before the CMOs want to put this tariff into the market, they've already taken into account of different factors before it is established as a certain tariff in the market. But especially for the usage of music, one of the very important factors we have to bear in mind is the value of music. Because music, like some kind of ingredients for you to run a business, you sometimes use music to enable you to be able to deliver your business in a better way. For example, if you operate a disco, I'm sure this disco would not be able to run without the usage of music. In a restaurant, if you don't have music, you still be able to run a restaurant if you can have a cook and you use food to cook. But without music, it may not be able to enhance the atmosphere to attract more customers to come to your restaurant. So music as a background music which will be able to enhance your business. So the value of music will play a very important part in determining the respective tariff for such usage. So this is a very important element, and we can classify them as essential music or background music as a two broad category. And we also very important to consider the nature and quantity of works being used. I won't go into detail because Mr. Hong has also spent some time. For example, karaoke, they will consider how many machines are being used, and how if a restaurant will determine how many table in the restaurant. So we look at how the music will be being used in a way to help to increase the potential business of the operation. And lastly, I think it's also very important element, each of the respective collecting societies will look at the other similar tariff from the other countries. Especially CISAC members, they will also look at the respective, because all these tariffs are very open and published in websites, so it's very easy to locate those information. So respective society will also look upon the information from other country to make adjustment or reference to specific usage, whether it will be applicable to the current to the local situation, and make the corresponding adjustment in respect to the economic situation. So these are very important reference for the local CMO to determine the tariff. Lastly, when actual tariff or collection amount is being collected out of the users, it is best to be achieved via negotiations. Any form of tariff, if has to be put into a very actual situation as to the actual amount being collected, it has to be taken into account for the actual situation. For example, if the CMOs are in negotiation with a trade unions, like hotel chain associations, if this is easier to negotiate with all the members of the hotel association, then they will probably, in many of the countries' practices, they will give them a discount. So that because that will be easier for people to negotiate. That will be some of the situation when they look at the tariff, and further will be taken into account all these factors for an actual collections. So these are the tariff setting made by respective CMOs. But regulating the setting of tariffs in different countries will have different way of regulating. this tariff setting mechanism. In countries like China and Korea, the government has to approve these rates before it is published in the public. In Vietnam and in Japan, the CMO will determine the rates, and then they will report and register with the respective authority. In some countries, we've heard in Taiwan and also in some of the common law jurisdictions and also in US, the way they will do it is by way of dispute dispute resolutions. In Taiwan, is through administrative review. In common law jurisdictions like in Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and UK, the rates will be determined by the copyright tribunal, and in US, the rate court will determine the tariff, proper tariff. But what is more important is what we heard in the Taiwan situation. We heard after 4 years of practice, we see more cases are being referred to TPO for determination of reference. I can share with you is in those countries where there is practice of dispute resolutions, not many cases are being referred to the copyright tribunals in each years, because in these countries there are more procedural rules to give and to give all these right holders and users to think very carefully, because there will be some legal costs involved. There will be some procedures to prohibit them to use the works without paying an interim payment. Other risks they have to consider before they go into this dispute resolution mechanism. So it will give more room for respective stakeholders, the users and the CMO, to consider whether negotiation will be a more achievable way to achieve a license. So this is what happened in other countries, and that may be a reference for Taiwan to consider in the future, to make reference whether this could be improved in the current system. And we want to make sure also there must be mechanism in place to discourage any abuse of this dispute resolution mechanism. So this is a very brief overview of tariff setting and tariff regulations. I leave it to my colleagues to explain to a more domestic situation, and we will later very happy to receive questions from the floor to answer all your questions later.